On the night of October 11th, 1973, two men walked into the Jackson County Sheriff's Office in Mississippi with a story that should have fallen apart almost immediately. They said they had been fishing beside the Pascagoula River when they heard a strange sound, saw blue lights, and were taken aboard an oval-shaped craft by three beings that did not look human. The older man, Charles Hickson, was 45. The younger, Calvin Parker, was 17. Parker was so shaken, according to Hickson, that he fainted during the encounter. The sheriff's officers were skeptical, and they had reason to be. So they tried something simple. They left Hickson and Parker alone in a room, secretly recording them, hoping the two men would drop the act. But on that tape, the strange part was not that they sounded rehearsed. It was that they didn't. The private recording became the uneasy center of the Pascagoula case. Not proof of aliens, not proof of a hoax, just a quiet problem that never quite went away. Pascagoula sits on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, a place of water, shipyards, bridges, and working riverbanks. On that October night, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were fishing off a pier on the west bank of the Pascagoula River. It was the kind of setting where strange noises could have ordinary sources: boats, machinery, traffic, industrial work carrying over water. But Hickson and Parker described something different. They said they heard a whirring or whizzing sound, then they saw two flashing blue lights. Near them, according to their account, was an oval-shaped object roughly 30 to 40 feet across and 8 to 10 feet high. What happened next is where the story leaves ordinary ground. Hickson said three creatures came out of the object. The descriptions that later circulated were strange even by UFO standards. Beings with unusual heads, claw-like or pincher-like hands, and movements that seemed mechanical rather than human. According to Hickson, Parker fainted and remained unconscious while they were taken aboard. Hickson said the beings examined them, then returned them to the wharf. That detail matters because it creates one of the case's most persistent weak points. If Parker was unconscious for much of the event, then his ability to independently confirm the most important parts becomes the harder to judge. But in the immediate aftermath, the two men did not seem eager to become famous. According to reports, they did not go straight to the sheriff's office. They first went to the Mississippi press, apparently hoping to tell someone there. When no newsmen were present, they continued to law enforcement. By around 11 that night, Hickson and Parker arrived at the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Captain Glenn Ryder was skeptical. He smelled alcohol on Hickson's breath, though Hickson said he drank whiskey only after the encounter, not before. Ryder later said the men were not drunk. Still, the story was so outlandish that officers suspected a prank. So they put the two men in a room together and recorded them secretly. That was the trap. If Hickson and Parker were inventing the story, this is the moment they might laugh, compare notes, or admit they had fooled everyone. Instead, the recording reportedly preserved the same frightened tone. That does not prove their story was physically true. People can believe things that did not happen the way they remember. People can panic, misread something strange, or build a story around fear before they fully understand what they saw. But the recording made a simple hoax harder to accept. They were not standing in front of reporters. They were not performing on television. They were not yet part of a UFO story moving across the country. They were two frightened men in a police building, apparently thinking they were alone. That is what gave the Pascagoula case its staying power. The next day, October 12th, the local newspaper reported their claim. From there, the story moved quickly. Wire services picked it up. Papers around the country ran with it. In the middle of the 1973 UFO wave, when sightings were already being reported across parts of the American South, Pascagoula became one of the most dramatic stories in the flood. The men were examined at Kessler Air Force Base and cleared of radiation exposure. Ufologists, investigators, and skeptics took interest. J. Allen Hynek and James Harder interviewed Hickson and Parker separately under hypnosis, and both publicly leaned toward the idea that the men's accounts were based on something real. But more attention did not make the case clearer. It made it louder. Hickson took a polygraph. A local examiner concluded that he appeared to be telling the truth as he believed it. That wording matters. A polygraph cannot prove that aliens landed beside the river. At best, it can suggest that a person does not appear to be consciously lying, and even that is a tool many investigators treat with caution. Parker did not take the same test unless Hickson requested it, and around that time he was reportedly hospitalized. After that came the public life of the case. Hickson appeared on national television. He gave interviews and lectures, and later wrote a self-published book about the experience. Over time, he also claimed additional encounters and continuing contact with the beings. For believers, those later claims have deepened the mystery. For skeptics, they've weakened it. The more a story grows after the original night, the harder it becomes to separate the first report from memory, attention, personal belief, and later interpretation. Skeptical investigators pointed to discrepancies in Hickson's account. Joe Nichols suggested that the encounter could be understood through a psychological lens, possibly a waking dreamlike state, with Parker's account shaped by suggestibility. That explanation has a plain kind of force. It does not require spacecraft, non-human beings, or hidden government file. It asks whether two people, under stress and in a strange setting, could have misread an experience and then reinforced each other's fear, but it still has to come back to the tape. Because the private conversation is not traumatic in the way hoax usually wants to be traumatic, it does not neatly explain the mechanics of the event. It does not turn two men into performers. It leaves them sounding afraid, confused, and trapped inside a story neither one seemed prepared to manage. That is not proof of what happened on the river, but it is evidence of something harder to brush aside: distress when there's no obvious audience. The years afterward did not resolve the case. Hickson died in 2011. Parker eventually told more of his own account and released the book in 2018, saying the event had affected his life deeply. A historical marker was later placed near the site, turning the riverbank into a public memory of something that still resists the clean label. Parker died in 2023. By then, the Pascagoula incident had become a case people approached from opposite directions. Some saw it as one of the stronger alien abduction accounts because of the men's fear and the secret recording. Others saw it as a story where trauma, suggestion, memory, and later embellishment could explain more the believers wanted to admit. The hard truth is that the physical evidence is thin. There is no recovered craft, no medical proof of an alien examination, and no independent record that confirms what Hickson said happened aboard the object. But the ordinary explanation is not complete either. Because even if nothing otherworldly happened on the Pascagoula River, something happened to those two men that night. Something sent them first to a newspaper office, then to the sheriff. Something made officers try to catch them lying, and something kept them sounding frightened when they thought nobody was listening. The Pascagoula case does not stand or fall on the strangest part of the story. It stands on the quietest one. Not the blue lights, not the oval craft, not the beams with pinchers. Those details are so extraordinary that they almost push the listener away. What remains harder to dismiss is the room afterwards. Two men left alone by skeptical officers, a recorder running in secret, and no clean break in the story when the pressure should have dropped. Maybe the tape captured two honest men describing something impossible. Maybe it captured two frightened men misunderstanding something ordinary. Or maybe it captured the moment a story became too heavy for either of them to put down. The riverbank is marked now. The witnesses are gone. But that recording still sits at the center of the case, not as an answer, but as the one piece of the night that keeps asking why fear sounded so real when no one was supposed to be listening.